once again, my name is Albrian Barnes, and I'm a member of Community Awareness Alliance. In our organization, we are currently sponsoring a series called Community Awareness, and we're discussing different topics. In this segment, we'll be discussing early voting, and would like to engage you in a very interesting topic as far as our politics are concerned. So we hope that you tune in. Let me once again introduce you to my guests. We have Ms. Ethelyn Baker, Christian Carlisle, and Reverend Floyd Wicker, and we're going to delve into the topic of early voting. Early voting is our response as a community to ensuring that we exercise our right to vote and to encourage as many people to come to the polls and to vote. This year, Ms. Ethelyn, Ms. Carlisle started a project, and she may be able to elaborate a little bit more on that, and we were able to get the Smith Rec Center opened for early voting. Early voting will begin on February 16th, Monday through Friday, from 8 to 5:30, and then it should end on February the 29th, I believe, and then on Election Day is March the 3rd. But you can always go to our Facebook page, Community Awareness Alliance, for further information about that. So, Christian, how can you talk to us about your experience as it pertains to early voting?
So, the Smith Rec campaign was, I guess it was an initiative to keep Smith Recreation open during the 2020 elections. I guess as far as my previous experience with early voting, it's always been like a big thing for me. GOTV, get out to vote. For a high turnout, municipal, national elections, but especially, local elections are really important. State elections as well, like that's going on this spring. But for the campaign, I'm sure many of you all saw it. It was under the head of Common Cause. We created a petition and we canvassed the neighborhood. We spoke to a lot of you all on campus to get them to sign our petition so that we could present it in front of the Board of Elections.
And that was monumental. I was there that day, and that catapulted into such a movement, so to speak, because once that took place and everything was voted upon, then it had to go to Raleigh, and people had to actually advocate on their idea of what they think, whether they think, early voting at the Smith Rec, was feasible.
So, it was a bit of a challenge, because like you were saying, just convincing basically, I guess the opposite narrative of why it was so important.
Right.
But we eventually prevailed, so.
That's fantastic. Yeah. That's fantastic. So in terms of early voting, Reverend Wicker, we're trying to have an event on February 16th for Souls to the Polls. And one of the reasons that we wanted to do this, once again, thanks again to Christian and her initiative, was we want to not only get more people to vote, but we want people to also have the opportunity to really understand why voting is so important. Can you share your ideas or thoughts of what it is that we're trying to do?
Well, when I think about why voting is so important, I think about our ancestors and our forebearers, and how they marched. Some of them were beaten. They were, had dogs sicked on them. They were attacked, and they faced all kinds of horrible kinds of situations just for the right to vote. So I think of voting as really a sacred act, because if voting were not so sacred and powerful, then they would not, meaning people who are doing underhanded things, they would not be fighting so hard to suppress our votes. And so voting in this day and age right now, I think it's critical. It's very important that we exercise our right to vote. There are people who are not citizens of the United States, and if they would die, I mean, well, not literally die, but they would really cherish the right to go and cast their ballot for whoever they would like to vote for. And so when I think about some of our communities, and we're not voting in the municipal election, we're not showing up in the statewide elections, when politics and who sets decisions affects every component of our lives, then I feel like that's where the church, and I'm a big proponent of the church being involved, that's where we have to step in and say, hey, this is why you should be concerned about the vote. And when we think about the Smith Recreation Center, and thank you for what you have done, this is the really mecca of the black community right here in Fayetteville. Murchison Road, Seabrook Park, Fayetteville State, and the history of this great area right here is very important. When you go look at that wall on Langdon Street, and you see all of the elders of our community, past and present. I mean, this is a wonderful place, and so place for us to have as a place for us to vote. And so I just think it's critical nowadays in this day and time, particularly the presidential election coming up, in various congressional races and local. It's imperative that we get out and I'm going to say it like this. I think we need to get out of the churches. And I'm glad that they do have this Sunday Souls to the Polls, because we need to take our souls to the polls and vote early. So I'm a huge proponent of getting involved. I mean, even the issue with homelessness. I mean, these city council persons and county commissioners, they're making the decisions as to whether or not we will or will not get a day center. So this is where we can assert our voice and exert our spirituality as well.
So, yeah, that's I guess that addresses the disconnect. We were talking about within the community, why is there a disconnect when you go back to homelessness and different things like that? But voting is such an important part of being able to, I guess, direct what it is, the vision for the community, Ms. Ethelyn. Well, how do you feel about the fact that there's a narrative out there that wants to say, well, it's not fair for you to have early voting at Smith Rec, or to try to decrease the number of days that early voting can take place?
Yes, I understand what you're saying. I think the problem is that many times the persons who may say sit on the local board of elections may have this feeling that certain polls or certain places do not really serve the people. And I think that was one of the problems with the Smith Center, because the fact is, according to one of the board members, and we know that on the board of elections, there are two Republicans and Democrats, those two major parties. One of the Republicans said that Smith was underserved, and that is why she voted against, because we know that unless the local board is unanimous, that's why it goes to the state board. And the fact that you and your comrades and persons in the millennial age group got out and really demanded, demonstrated, got people out to go to the state, and the state board ruled in your favor. But it's very important that I think that whoever we elected officials, we think are going to serve the people. Because although the persons who sit on the board are not elected, they are volunteered and they are chosen, not elected by the people to sit on the board of elections. But on the other hand, the people who sit on the board of elections many times reflect whoever's in their particular district. Because one of the persons who sits on the board now was running for an office for the state. And therefore, this particular individual felt that Smith was underserved. So I think I would just like to say, give in advocate for Smith Recreation Center, regardless of what district you live in, what precinct you live in, during early voting, you could go to any precinct to vote. But I urge the people to go to Smith for during early voting. Go to Smith so that when the person looks at whoever is voting in that district, because the fact is, when you go to attend the Board of Elections, you have to sign in. And the person looked at the people who were signed in as to where they lived.
Yeah.
And she went and looked at the rolls, the Board of Election rolls, to find out where. And that's how she was able to say, well, the people who attended don't live in that district. So what does it matter? You're supposed to be wanting people to vote. You're supposed to be advocating for voting, regardless of what district, what party you belong to. So that's why, as Reverend Wicker was saying, it's important to vote regardless of what ethnicity you are. If you're eligible to vote, eligible to register and vote. Don't just register and not vote. Because as citizens, that's the only power we have, is our vote.
That's right.
You have the power in your vote. Many of the people who elected, as we already know, are well-to-do people, rich people. And they use their power, their economic power, to manipulate the citizens of our country. And as citizens, we have a right to vote, and we have the power. And I just want to say this in addition to what I'm saying. Think in terms of fact is that although everyone has a right to choose whatever party you want to belong to, it doesn't matter, because you have a right to vote. But think about in the national election, think about the House of Representatives and the House of Senate. The House is now Democrat because people voted. Suppose they hadn't voted, it would be just like same parties. So that's just an example. And when you're talking to the younger people, let them know they have the power and encourage them to vote. Convince them that their vote is important, especially nowadays. And it's their children, those who choose to have children, the younger people, their children will be eligible to vote. Say in 8 years, those who children are 10 years old, for example, they'll be able to vote. 8 years. The ones who are in high school, freshmen, they're going to be able to vote in 2024.
Yeah.
So just emphasize that, push that home to them. I just want to say that voting, as you stated, is important regardless of course, our ancestors died, but regardless of the death, everyone who's eligible has a right to vote and push for our rights.
Well, how do you feel? And that's such an honest and just a very poignant perspective, Ms. Ethelyn. And I was also thinking about the fact that non-voting is voting by default.
Yeah.
So what response do you have to I guess voicing or speaking to those who don't vote, that they are voting by default? How can we encourage them to realize that the fact that they don't vote does not mean that they are not participating in the process? They're participating in the process, but perhaps they're not choosing how to participate in the process if they stay home and don't vote. So how do we convey that type of a message to those persons who may not be interested or may not realize that inactivity is voting?
Well, I personally think that we should present information to them, factual information, to let them know how it's going to affect them, how it will affect, especially during this year, the year of the census taking. And in fact, this particular election is very crucial. And many of the younger people, and I say younger people because that's when I get out and try to campaign, I come in contact with a lot of younger people. When I approach them, and I have them to tell me, my vote doesn't count. But on the other hand, now that we're pushing, say for example, to change the process, like get rid of the electoral college, and in their lifetime, the ones I may talk to, their lifetime, it will happen. Because we know change does take place.
That's right.
It's just a matter of pushing and and taking time, continue to persevere, it will take place. So I suggest that we talk about that particular thing, that although you might have the popular vote and the effect that electoral college has, but think about the fact that if you do not vote, then your vote is not part of this particular popular vote. The number of popular votes also determines how many electoral votes the candidate or the nominee gets. So I think that is one particular way we can influence them and encourage them to get out there and vote.
Okay.
And Democracy Now!, they have a pamphlet out, and it tells what churches can do, ways that churches can get involved, things they can do and what they cannot do. So I would say on a practical level, one of the things that I'm passionate about is having moments where we can teach and share with people why this is important, how this relates to your everyday life. And I think when we can make this relevant, when we can really break it down, some people may not have paid attention in their social studies class.
Right.
So they may not understand parliament or parliamentary procedures or how things work in the various branches of government. But once we can make that plain to them and explain to them, I think you'll see a lot of people waking up. And I think that's what we need to do in our churches and organizations. We need to, a lot of times, like Ms. Ethelyn said, a lot of times people who know what's going on, they keep that information from us. Because once we understand that there's power in our vote, then we can wake up as a community. And I think that's what I'm passionate about, and that's why I'm so excited to be a part of this Community Awareness Alliance, because, hey, we're talking, and when I get to be a little older, I want to be just like Miss Ethelyn.
You could be a lot older.
Krista, any final thoughts?
Yeah, civic education is a big thing. Politics isn't, is scary as everyone might make it seem. Those conversations, like, you can't be scared to have those conversations, maybe after you watch 13th, or maybe after you watch When They See Us, or anything that triggers you is politics, more than likely. So, just start having a conversation. And civic events at church, civic events at school, it may not be the most popular thing in the moment, but, if you continue, you keep having these events and keep the conversation going, then maybe we'll be a lot more aware.
Well, I just would like to encourage everybody to come out and vote, and I want to make a correction. I did say the 16th earlier, but early voting starts February 13th to the 29th. And we're having souls to the polls specifically on Sunday, February 16th at the Smith Rec Center, Seabrook Avenue, 1520 Slater Avenue in Fayetteville, from 1:30 p.m. to 5 p.m. Please come out, and like Ms. Ethelyn said, make this count. Make this one of the highest attendance that we have for Souls to the Polls and for early voting in general. You can contact us on Facebook at Community Awareness Alliance on Facebook, and also you can contact Brother Willie Williams at 910-987-0217 to inquire if you have any further questions and things of that nature.
Before we end,
yes,
I would like to just say to the audience out there, particularly the women, this is the 100th year that women gained the right to vote.
Yay.
And one of the things is that ERA, Equal Rights Amendment, passed in Virginia. We had to have 38 states. So Virginia became the 38th state, but now there are congressmen up there who try not to put it in the Constitution. In other words, we're telling you to get out there and vote, because your life, your children's life, depends upon it. Equal rights. That's what we need and continue to need that. So get out there and tell your children who are eligible to vote If you're 17 years of age, you can register if you're going to be 18 by November, election day. So vote, vote, vote.
Vote, vote,
All right.
vote, 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 vote. Thank you for tuning in.